I had been told that the moon was hollow, that the moon had computers on the inside, that for literally millions of years it has been a machine that orbits our Earth, and that non-humans, through computers and through androids and clones and all kinds of artificial intelligence, there are monitoring systems of our planet. They do laboratory experiments, they interact, and that the moon as a machine is the device in which all of this monitoring is done. It was only a couple of years after I had done the documentary A Strange Harvest for the CBS station in Denver that a man who was working with an abductee came to me and said, I'm working with a man, he's going to go to Peru. He has had interactions with gray beings and a variety of beings, and he says they have shown him through some hologram, as well as told him that our moon is a machine, that it is hollow, that it is filled with what we would call computer equipment, and that it has been used as a monitoring and manipulation station by non-humans of their laboratory experiment of Earth for millions of years. And I can still remember how I felt as this man was sitting across from me. He had an engineering background, and he was working with the abductee because the abductee had had some information that caught the engineer's attention at a technology level. So I've always thought back that that was the first time that I was exposed to this idea. As time went on, I have talked with people who have worked in government intel agencies on what is called the alien presence problem. And a couple of times when I've said, I've been told by an abductee that the moon is a machine filled with computers. It watches, observes, downloads, uploads information to someone somewhere else in the universe. Twice, people who would be CIA, NSA, have said, it's absolutely right. And then when you say, can you give me more details? You can't get anything more than that the moon is a machine.
I don't know if there's anybody on the moon or not. I have a gut suspicion there is. Do you know we have a society set up to preserve all the landing sites of the moon? Now you think about that. What if you owned the moon? You lived there. Did anybody bother asking you that? Do you know, I have a theory like everybody else. I think I know why we got tossed off the moon. And it's not that deep state conspiracy thing. It's really pretty simple. Do you know how much junk we left on the moon? 200 tons. 400,000 pounds. There's 96 bags of feces laying up there. Astronauts had to go somewhere. They just toss it out. So imagine you littered 400,000 pounds of junk all over the surface. You're coming to stay there permanently, and you haven't even got there yet. You put nearly 500,000 pounds of junk on the moon. So if you own the moon and we're up on your roof, what's your opinion about that? You would walk out there and tell us, take some pictures, gather up a few rocks, and then get off our damn moon. Don't ever come back here, you bunch of pigs. I think we got thrown out for littering. So my first proposal, if I make contact, apologize for the mess, be willing to go pick up 400,000 pounds of junk and bring it back. You know what you do with all the junk? You go to Sotheby's. You auction it off. You pay for your entire program. What would people pay for 96 bags of feces? A bunch. So anyway, you clean up the moon and then get off on the right foot. Ask permission. What can we do or not do? It's their home. But we'll find out. I don't know if there's anybody there or not, but I want to go and find out.
I don't know a single person who could tell you, me, anyone, who precisely has territory with computers, downloading, uploading. When you go to people who say that they have actually been on the moon and have dealt with something of an alien presence, whether they were photographing from a LEM or whatever, they will say they know that there are grays, they know that there's something else. If I were asked, what is the biggest significant change in the last 40 years about the whole issue of an alien presence? Who are they, and what is the agenda, and where are they from? This is a big evolutionary change. If you go back to Betty and Barney Hill, New Hampshire, 1961, it was the first human abduction case to make a TV series. Odd grays. Betty Hill did drawings. They were not the classic pear-shaped heads. They were not the classic pointed chins like Whitley Strieber. And she said they told her that in the realm of alien intelligence interacting with the Earth, they were renegades.
There's such strange anomalies with the moon. I could go for days. For instance, a very simple thing you can do on the blackboard. I can show you mathematically. The Earth does not have the mass to capture a satellite as big as our moon is. If you look at the two moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, they look like Idaho potatoes. And that they're relatively correct in proportion to size that Mars could capture such moons. Look at the size of our moon. You can take the continent of North America and put it on the face of the moon. So times 2. That's a huge area. And that brings us to another topic. People go, why do you want to go back to the moon? We've already been there. We know what's there. Like hell you do. If you take all the square footage and square area that the lunar rovers did in the 6 landings, put it together, it's not even the size of the Mall of America with its parking lots. Now put that on the continent of North America, it's just a dot, times 2. You haven't even explored 0.5% of the moon. You have no idea what's up there. So it's ludicrous that somebody would say, oh, we've already been there and explored that. You have not. And that's why we need to go back to the moon. And there's another project of my first 7. And once I get there, whether somebody's living there or not, we'll get through that part. Next part is start mining helium-3. And I've already laid out a detailed project that's taken me 4 decades to work out. And I shared this with China 30 years ago. Where's China right now with the moon? They're on the backside mining helium-3. It's my devices they're using. But that's okay. At least they did me a favor. I know I went from theory to fact. My stuff works. I didn't know the little boogers were going to go up there and mine the moon, but they did. You know, God bless them. Good for them. But there's enormous amounts of helium-3 on the surface of the moon, and definitely want to get hold of that. And I can bring that back and feed it into my reactors. And you'll want to do so because if you study helium-3, what it would do with fusion and fission reactors of here in the present state that they're in now, their efficiency would about quadruple. And radiation levels would drop tremendous. And that's not even counting the other reactors I'm building. I got 2 reactors. One is a thorium reactor and the other is a fusion containment. So it's a multi-level program that I have running. I'm careful about telling you things. If I tell you something, it's because I've had my hands on it. I've touched it. You know, I work in labs. I build things. So very much a touchy-feely, researcher, explorer. I have looked at some of the photos of the structures on the moon. I can't say conclusively what they are, but I will tell you this. They're like crop circles. They're real, and they definitely warrant serious looking at and returning to. You got a big tower out there. You got an arch, like the St. Louis Arch. But these structures are huge compared to ones on Earth. You got a thing that looks like a moon base. Looks like somebody took a Galaxy class ship from Star Trek and slid it into home and threw dirt up around it and said the moon base. I don't know what that is, but let's go see. Some of those structures are so smooth, they're not made out of indigenous material of the moon. So what are they? Let's go find out. So I don't know for sure, but if this was a fire, there's a lot of smoke. There's a fire somewhere. And just the way NASA has behaved over the last decades, I mean, just look at the situation today. In a few days here, we're going to be at the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. 50 years later, I can't even get a human being off the planet. Who would have thought that? Back in 1969, I could hurl 450 tons of equipment to the moon and back, 500,000-mile round trip. And that was 50 years ago. Today, I can't even go to the moon. I can't even get into space now. You've done shut everything down. So why is that? You know, why did you burn the Pinta and the Santa Maria and the ships that Columbus was on? We did the same. We did just that. We came back and burned our ships. Pad 37A and B at the Cape is nothing but slabs of concrete. They cut the structures down and sold it for scrap iron to China. I can't, and put all the space shuttles in the museum and then told us it's time to celebrate. I shot my TV that day. I don't have a logical answer to tell you. There's nothing that makes sense unless there's another part of the story we have not been told. You know, they ran us off and then we're not allowed to come back. There's no reason for us. We're 50 years in the future. And where are we? Did we go forwards or backwards? We went backwards. We ain't even got a way to get off the planet now. You have amateur astronomers by the millions all over the planet. And with today's technology, their little telescopes are significant. Just look at a commercial Celestron telescope. That thing you can really see. Somebody would have seen something coming and going. Unless they're completely stealth, and then there's, like cloaked vehicles of Klingons.
Do you think we've got that technology yet?
Honestly, I wouldn't put it past that we do. I'm pretty sure we do, because back in 1971, the stuff that I saw that was there was a good 50 to 100 years ahead. So imagine what they got today. So if they're going in that roadway or that path, they should be really significantly far ahead, and they would have stuff like that.
And interestingly enough, our own experiments out of NASA of slamming things on the moon and it rings indicates that there has to be some kind of hollowness. I've seen a drawing. It looked like computers. So an abductee, whether is it telepathy? Were they taken to the moon? Were they taken inside? How much is literal eye-to-eye interaction, which is what humans would prefer to know, as opposed to telepathic downloads or holograms that are used instead of books, television, monitors, and a computer. Holograms are used more than anything else to communicate with Homo sapiens sapien. I'm convinced of that of my work. So the transmission vehicle for this information is not what the normal human is used to. But when you get drawings and people will point and say the moon is hollow, and there's equipment inside, it fits into what this government guy said. And if you add one more perspective, and that was from December of 1999, He was a man who was retiring from the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington after 23 years. He told me his job had been to monitor and analyze the geopolitical territorial conflict of 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations on this planet and throughout our solar system. And he said that our government in the United States had proof that these civilizations have been competing with each other in our solar system and on this planet for at least 270 million years. And when I said, what is the proof? He said, Linda, if I told you, it would be too dangerous for you and for me. It's one of the most intriguing answers to a question in my entire professional career. I don't have an answer. Why would it be dangerous to know the proof of competing extraterrestrial civilizations on our planet and in the solar system for at least 270 million years? I've thought a lot about that.
I suspect there's things going on, and your really hotbed of activity is going to be on the dark side. That's another thing about our moon. Remember I said earlier I could go on for hours. Our moon is in a tidal lock, meaning that it doesn't rotate. That's not normal. We never see the backside of the moon. The moon's too big for us to capture. And then there's a statement by the astrophysicists themselves, and they kind of let it slip. They'll tell you that when the moon got here, do you know it stopped only 22,000 miles away from Earth? That's geosynchronous orbit. And it's been moving 1.5 inches back every year. And now it's out 248,000 miles. Do you realize that moon was only 22,000 miles away? You'd step out back, talk about a full moon. The entire horizon would be covered by the moon. Now here's my question. Unless I completely misunderstood all my life about celestial mechanics, a mass that big coming into the Earth, how does it stop? Because it should just slowly plow right into the Earth and just, be a mess. But it stopped. So how did it do that? Well, somebody probably turned the engines off. I don't know. But there's just so much with the moon that going on with it that we can't explain things, and it just doesn't make sense. And they just don't even bother talking about it. And that's not science. You don't, because something doesn't fit your little pigeonhole, you don't want to talk about it. Man, that's lame. You don't do science like that. You get in there and you research. You find out what's going on. And if you can't get the questions answered, you go there and start stomping around on the place and digging up stuff and finding things. NASA is privy to stuff. And NASA, when it got started in 1958, that thing was an extension of the CIA. So it's been in that elitist status ever since day one, and I have personally dealt with that stuff, and it's a nasty bunch of people. And they don't give a hoot about us at all. And a space program, that should be a universal denominator on the planet. Everybody's involved in that.
One of the segments that I really, really wanted to do was to talk with the astronauts who had been on the moon or had orbited the moon. And had they seen UFOs or anything? Because I had been told that the moon was hollow, that the moon had computers on the inside, that for literally millions of years it has been a machine that orbits our Earth, and that non-humans, through computers and through androids and clones and all kinds of artificial intelligence, there are monitoring systems of our planet. They do laboratory experiments, they interact, and that the moon as a machine is the device in which all of this monitoring is done. So I got to talk with Pete McDivitt about a very strange thing that he saw. Talked to Edgar Mitchell, talked with just a variety of different astronauts who had all seen strange things. The top of my list was Neil Armstrong, the first human to put their feet on the moon. All the other astronauts were easy. Just started doing a search, got phone numbers, called them up, took a crew, went out and talked to them. Nobody could get a phone number for Neil Armstrong. And as the senior producer and the person who was creating this series, and I had done so much work in the planet, and I had done medical programming and all, and I never had a problem. Why? I mean, he's world famous. He goes down in the history of the universe as the first man to step on the moon. And I'm working for Paramount to get a series on Fox, and I can't get a phone number to talk with him about the going to the moon. What is this about? Finally, I got a reference to a man who, in their teenage to early 20 years, they were the best friends, Neil Armstrong, and we'll just call this man John Smith. John Smith and Neil Armstrong were like this. They did jet training together. So I'm given his phone number to call up to learn what happened to Neil Armstrong. I'll never forget this dinner. I called up this man, told him what I was doing, working on this Fox special. He said, I can't talk to you on the phone. Let's meet for dinner. And here's the story. He said, like you, I watched Neil in that ticker tape parade in New York. First man in history to put his feet on the moon. And I remember all the days that Neil and I were learning this jet and we were the closest of friends, and I called him up. And it was soon after that ticker tape, I said, Neil, and like two buddies from 18 to 21, 22 years old, can you imagine making a phone call like that? And Neil Armstrong has no reaction. And he said, it wasn't like I was talking to my old buddy at all. It's like, what is wrong here? And Neil Armstrong said to John Smith, let's not go out. You just come over to my house. He said he got there. Hardly any lights in the house. He rings the doorbell. His old buddy, Neil Armstrong, opens the door. I mean, you would think there would be, oh man! He said he was even looking at the floor. Neil Armstrong takes him into a living room. He said there was only one light on. Neil Armstrong sat down on a sofa. John Smith sat in a chair. He said, Neil, what is wrong? And he said, Neil Armstrong didn't even look at him eye to eye, is looking down at the floor when he says, you know, when the LEM was coming down and all that dust came up and NASA Mission Control said that they'd seen some rocks and they were having to turn right at the last minute so that they wouldn't hit the rocks. There were 3 huge silver craft right at the edge of the crater, and the camera was aimed and we would have shown the entire world these 3 big silver craft. And that's why I turned. And then, the whole evening, John Smith said, I thought I would be there for like dinner like the old days. And he said, it was short. He clearly, Linda, he said, you know somebody so well. And he gave me that one insight about the truth. And he gets back and he's in New York City with a huge ticker tape parade, and he's had probably to sign non-disclosure agreements. You never talk about this. You never, ever. Would you want to go out into the world and look in people's eyes and be asked to sign autographs and be on television knowing that every single word that you were saying was a lie? After you were being put up as a hero, the first man to walk on the moon, and behind you is NASA and the CIA and the NSA saying you can never talk about the alien presence on the moon. And that's what I learned, producing UFO report sightings in Los Angeles in the early 90s. And that our special aired, I think it was October of, maybe it was October of 91. I keep thinking of 90 because I think I had been working at Fox then. So I think it was October of 91. October 18th, 1991. It just popped in. That's the night. What was behind that special with the astronauts? Even Pete McDivitt had a Hasselblad. This strange cylindrical thing comes up outside of the window of their spacecraft. He said, I took 35 photographs with a Hasselblad, highest resolution instrument you could possibly take. He said, I knew we got good photographs. I knew it was close. When they come back, everything, cameras, everything goes to various places in NASA. And he wanted to see his photos. And he went over to one of the photo labs when everything was cleared and he could. He said, I want to see my photos. And he said, the guy behind the desk said, sir, I'm sorry, they're classified. And he said, well, I'm the astronaut who took the photographs. And the NASA man went away and came back, like he went to ask somebody, and came back and said, sir, you don't have a need to know. And Pete McDivitt said, you know what is going on here? And this is how the astronauts and all of their various stories, they would like to say, ladies and gentlemen and children of Earth, there's life on the moon, probably throughout the solar system, throughout the Milky Way galaxy. We have interstellar trade routes. We've had them since the 70s, and we're still living on a planet that makes Neil Armstrong and other astronauts lie about what they know.
I hate the question, and it comes up at dinner. Where were you when Neil Armstrong was walking on the moon? And they go around the table and they come up to me and I go, I got 2 choices, lie or tell the truth. Most of the time I lie. My lie is I was at home watching on TV. You want to know where it really was? I was leaning back against the knees of Viola Armstrong, Neil's mother. I am in Wapakoneta, Ohio, at his home. And when Neil was sleeping on the moon that night, I was sleeping in his childhood bed. Viola Armstrong was my surrogate mother. I grew up in that world with them. And I knew Neil well, but Neil wasn't who I was going to see when I come over all the time. They only lived an hour by car from my house. I was in Centerburg, Ohio. They're over in Wapakoneta. I'd come running in. Neil might be visiting. Hi, Neil. Run right past him. He goes, Mom's in the backyard. So I go in the backyard because that's where our canning stuff was, where we canned vegetables. She and I became really close friends. Well, how'd that happen? Neil got selected to be the first man on the moon. Now she is the mother of the first man on the moon. That makes her a dignitary. So she's the one that would go around in Ohio hanging medals around winners' necks. And after about the 8th or 9th medal she hung on my neck, in 4 weeks, she's going, what are you doing, child? I said, I guess I'm busy. She said, come over to my house and let's meet and talk. And we became friends. And she taught me how to can. Now, Armstrongs are German, and there was a bunch of Germans came into Ohio in the beginning of our country. And they had a huge farms, potato farms. And they became a co-op. So in the fall, they harvest all their food and then they share it among the families. And so you start canning. So when we can, Viola and I didn't can 400 or 500 jars and that's it. It's more like 10, 12,000 jars because it's co-op. So I had like an assembly line out back with all my bottles and my lids and I was prepping and blanching and she was the other women were packing and cutting and prepping. Anyway, it was a lot of fun in canning and I had so much fun with her. But I ran past Neil and Viola came up to me one day and she said, now just imagine this statement. The mother of the first man on the moon comes up to you and says to you, David, Neil said something today about you. I said, yeah, what? He said, Mom, if I didn't get out of the way fast enough, I think David would put a footprint on my head to get there. Back to you. And I said, oh, I didn't hurt his feelings, did I? She said, I don't know, but could you make some time to talk to him? Can you imagine you being asked that question? First man on the moon, can you make some time and talk to him? Yeah. So I sat down and talked to Neil. But I knew Neil. I know so many personal, intimate stories on Neil. There's a lot of them I just can't. I promise Viola I wouldn't say. But there's some really cool stories with him.
Was he a good guy?
Very. He was a Boy Scout. He was the last of the Boy Scouts.
Was he honest?
He was actually an Eagle Scout. Very honest.
Did he change when he come back from the moon?
Something happened. Neil was always stoic, like a Mr. Spock. But I can tell, I've been around him so long, body language stuff. I know if he doesn't want to answer a question, he just won't talk or he'll smile and walk off, or he'll just change to something else. I had to ask him, I said, man, did you run anything strange up there? Anybody up there? And he didn't say no. He just said, there's just all kinds of things that went on up there. And I was looking at his face, I'm going, man, something went on up there.
Do you think he took those secrets to the grave?
Yes.
About his mum? Would he have shared them with his mum or?
He did. She shared some things with me. But there was still some things between a mother and son I couldn't even get into. But I was a close member of the family. All of that's been proven in a book written by the great nephew of Viola. He called me, and he is Jay Matchett. And Jay Matchett, he pulled Viola's personal effects out of her collection of memoirs to write a book. And they opened up this box, and it's just stacks and stacks of letters tied in ribbons. And they were letters between her and I. And he said, who are you? The family don't know anything about you. I said, well, Viola and I planned it that way. We both had a paparazzi problem. So we didn't want anybody to know about us hanging out together. So we just kept it quiet. And they said, I have all these personal gifts from her. Her handwriting, I was going to bring a book with me. I just forgot to bring it. But she gave me a book on my 18th graduation. And it's Russell Cromwell's Acres of Diamonds. But her handwriting looks like a machine. Just beautiful penmanship. Well, they looked at the handwriting, Jay did, and all the letters, and the family verified that's real. Said, man, you are who you say. Here it all is. And we didn't know anything about you. Neil and his uncle were baling hay one day. Neil's about 14 years old. And a plane comes into the field. It's on fire, smoking. It crashed badly. So they ride over and they pull the pilot out. He's hurt bad. He's dying. Neil stays with the pilot while the uncle gets help. And the pilot is, in Neil's lap. And the pilot tells Neil, he said, think you ever like to fly, kid? And Neil goes, of course. He said, don't let this accident throw you off. This is really rare. He said, go ahead and fly. He said, it's the best thing in the world you can do. And he dies. And that was a real moving experience for Neil, but hardly anybody knows that story. Tell you another incident. When Neil found out he was the first man on the moon selected, when he got back to Viola's house, he come running in the house screaming, I've been selected. Startled her so bad, she dropped a jar of blackberry jam on her right big toe and broke it. And so I told Neil, I said, next time you run in and say something, take it easy on my partner there. She's got to stand on that foot. You see, there's a lot went on in the programs that most of you aren't privy to. Why was it that Neil was selected as first and Buzz second? Why wasn't it the other way around? NASA looked at the profiles on everybody, the psych reports. Clearly, Neil was a hermit. So when he came back from the moon, what happened? He disappeared. Well, not from me. I knew where he was all the time. He came back home, went on some touring, and his wife then wanted him to keep doing touring and the fame. And he was so against the fame, they divorced. That was a painful divorce for him. I remember I was at a Farmer Grange Association of the local sharecroppers. Neil was there talking to him. And this reporter come running in, uninvited, shoves the camera in his face, takes a picture. Neil uppercuts this guy so hard, the camera went straight up in the air. It was one of them big ones with the bellows thing. And I get under it and I catch it. And the guy is knocked out cold. And I lay the camera on his chest. And Neil said, let's go. And we did. And that's last. But I mean, I've watched Neil knock the guy out. If you doubt that, you remember when Buzz Aldrin hit that dude? And the judge ruled that the guy got what he deserved. I like that part. But the reason NASA picked Neil, his profile showed he'd be a hermit. He came back home and disappeared. What they did not want to deal with is a term called astropower. That's where the astronauts could build a name like Joe Montana. They kept them all suppressed. However, Buzz Aldrin was the exact opposite. He's an extrovert. Neil was an introvert. But the title First Man on the Moon, that is a humongous title, and they will very careful who they gave that to. And Neil was selected because it showed that he would disappear. And what he did, he joined his brother out in South Dakota in the oil rig drilling business. And they made a lot of money, and they sold out right before the 80s bust. And they made a fortune. And so Neil, really was set financially pretty well after that. Then what he did, he went back to Lebanon, Ohio, at the University of Cincinnati and became a physics teacher, and he was there for the duration of most of his life. And that's where he was. You could find him every day on campus, but nobody ever knew where he was hardly. And he did exactly what NASA wanted him to do, just move into obscurity. Now, Buzz's been just the opposite. You know, he danced with the stars and stuff. So they didn't want to give him that title. Now, these titles are really important to a lot of people, was to Buzz. But, you know, one of the biggest titles of the 20th century was First Man on the Moon. This group I'm dealing with, of these 1%ers, I told them I can give you a title bigger than that. And they're going, how's that possible? Matter of fact, I can give you a name, immortality. You guys got so much money, the one thing you can't buy is time. You won't live forever. So you're looking for immortality. I can hand that to you. How so? We go back to the moon. And the way my drones are set, I'll come in, I'm going to go all 12 sites. Well, maybe after a second, or maybe the very first one, or 2 or 3 sites, some little creature walks out with a weapon, just boom, blows our probe out of the sky. We get it on camera. I'm beaming everything live feed back to Earth. So you'll see at the same time we do. So there's our probes gone. Next day, one word across the entire page of newspapers, contact. And whoever funded Contact's name will go down through all of history forever. Bigger than Neil Armstrong's. And they all were dead quiet, and they said, we like the way you think. I said, I bet you do. So, anyway, that's where I am with that crowd. Well, I can tell you one thing from personal experience. God has a really warped sense of humor. He really is. He likes dark humor. I mean, you get a redneck hillbilly born to a family of illiterates who's working quantum physics differential mechanics at age 7. How about that for a twist? And then this chain of events that occurred that was just insane. And the people that showed up and the way things happened. And now current. At this moment, I believe my entire life was programmed up to this moment. Because, once again, it's a big if. But if these people are real, if this money's real, I'll alter the course of the entire world, planet, everybody. And you'll watch it. And it'll be quick. It'll be very quick. Not talking 30, 40 years. We're talking 5, 6 years. In 5 years, I could have the biggest spaceport on the planet. I could have wagon wheels in orbit. I'll already be on the moon, made new friends. And then we'll be on our way to Mars. And somewhere along the line, if I have time to bring my fusion containment engine back online, Star Trek. I'll give you star travel. If the idiots hadn't gotten to a tug of war with me between the Air Force and the CIA in 1971, and I didn't even get to go to college. I went to college when I was 40 years old. Instead, I was thrown into college, and I was just forced into the military. They shanghaied me, and I was there for 11 years. But if he had worked with me at that time instead of against me in the tug of war, we would have star travel right now. I'd be in phase 4 of my containment design. And at phase 4, I could get you to places you couldn't even imagine. Because in my containment engine, I answered the riddle that Einstein once wrote. He asked a question, a riddle. How can you go millions of times faster than the speed of light without breaking the speed of light and remaining constant in Newtonian physics? I answered the riddle. The best way to do it is take a piece of paper. I did this for a movie called Event Horizon. I wrote this part for them. Sam Neill, the actor, he's describing it. You got a piece of paper here. Here's the Milky Way galaxy. Here's Andromeda. Now, shortest distance is a straight line, right? Yeah. Well, not really. There's another way. So you got this piece of paper, and at the speed of light, at 186,756 miles per second, it'd take you 200 million years to get across this page. 200 million light years away is Andromeda. I can get you there a whole lot faster. In phase 4, my craft has a containment field around the engine cells. But then you build a secondary wave of the containment field outside the spacecraft. Your spacecraft has now become an artificial black hole. And you take that piece of paper and you roll it up and flatten it out in linear, straight line. You'll fly at about half light speed across that edge. And what you're doing, you're jumping through, each of these walls are touching each other and you're jumping through them. And so it's something I coined called trans-dimensional jump drive. You'll jump through that area, in that little short area, about half light speed, shut off your engine, roll out the paper, and you're over here at Andromeda in less than 5 minutes your time. How about that for speed?